The EU, yeah? Did we finish? Did we get up to the euro and stuff? So we didn't talk about the second treaty, we just talked about the Rome Treaty?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, again, so basically, again, just don't forget about some of the stuff in Western Europe. Obviously, the big focus on de Gaulle in France, failure of the Fourth Republic, problems of the Fifth Republic under de Gaulle. West Germany, of course, Adenauer and Brandt. Britain, there are two big policies of nationalization and creating the welfare state. Which part of that's going to be, which one of those big policies is going to be reduced over time? Nationalization or welfare state?
Nationalization.
That, you're going to have a huge push for privatization under Margaret Thatcher, although the welfare state is more or less intact as it was developed back then. Then we were talking about the European Union and the development of the EEC that was a result of what 1957 treaty?
The Rome.
The Rome Treaty. Again, this created this free trade zone, and it also allows these countries to trade as a trading bloc. We talked about that? What?
Yes.
All right, and then the other big point, of course, is that after the EEC is created, it's going to what? It's going to expand. Today, again, the EU is about 25 or 6 different countries. Again, you can see that many of the former Soviet areas and republics are now a part of the EU. What was I going to say? So we talk about like some of that today there's very specific requirements you have to meet to be into the EU. Do we mention that kind of stuff? You know, they're not going to let any kind of country come into their economic union. You've got to show that you have only a certain rate of inflation over a certain amount of time. You've got to show that your economy is growing at a certain rate, yes. You have to be a democracy. You have to respect human rights. That's a big part of the EU. So there are certainly restrictions, but you can see it's expanding greatly. Now, the next important time in the EU's existence was in '92, when there were only about 12 member states. They're going to sign another treaty. The treaty, again, is in the next chapter, but it's called, right now, it's called the Maastricht Treaty. MAAS. Tricht. Mass with 2 A's, and then Tricht. Tricht. It is at this treaty when these 12 member states decide to completely integrate their what together? Their economies. It's not just a free trade zone. We are now one integrated economy. And we were all going to use the same what? So this is the treaty that adopted the common currency called the euro. Now obviously they adopt it in '92. It's not put into circulation until 10 years later, because it takes quite a long time to make that transition to an integrated economy. Again, you're dealing with all these different monies that are all worth different values, and the idea is to try and balance everything out and lead to the euro, again, being developed in 2002. So that's the next big treaty, is the Maastricht. You have an integrated economy. Here are 3 problems of the EU today. Just issues that the EU deals with that you should be aware about. 1, the people that represent the EU in these countries, like there's Germans that represent Germany in the EU and so forth, they're not democratically elected people. All right? They're chosen. And much of the population doesn't like that their state's representatives are not chosen by them, and therefore they're not beholden to them and the population. They're maybe beholden to whoever nominated them. So that's one of the issues. The EU reps are not democratically elected. Another just interesting issue that we've been seeing lately is, hopefully you realize we're in one of the worst economic situations since the Depression, yes? In the last several years, you had economies collapse in Greece, Spain, and Ireland, okay? And the issue then is, what do we do? Do we let these places fail, or do we as an EU bail them out? All right, because obviously if they fail, that's going to have a what on the EU? A major impact. So this is one of the big issues. In fact, right now, Germany is loaning like $1 billion to a place like Greece as a way to help their economy out, but with very strict rules. And of course, the Greek population doesn't like these rules being imposed upon them. But you know what? Germany's what? Bailing them out. So the question is, do we bail them out? Do we not? This is one of these issues that's really plaguing the EU in times of economic difficulty. And the last one's pretty simple. Again, these places are economically integrated, but like it or not, they're still nations with specific national what? Interests and needs. And sometimes those economic interests of the EU clash with a nation's political interests. So that's been a difficulty. You're only integrated economically. You still have a lot of nationalism in these areas. And that's helped plague the EU as well. So just some modern issues that surround the EU today. I'll do this later, I think. Okay, look at, let's just take out our outline, please. Stop. What? No, as I was walking around there once, it's sick hot outside already. All right, all I want to do, and this is going to be really brief, is, we're on section 5 of the outline. I just want to go through a couple points that I want to make. You guys can read it, but these are just some points I wanted to make that I wanted to highlight. And you could just use the outline if you want. So section 5 says the emergence of a new society. Yes? Yes?
Yeah.
This is nothing new. This is just the modern society that we've been seeing develop for the last couple hundred years. The whole point of this reading is going to show us how everyone lives where. What?
In society.
Where in society? People live in cities, correct? People are involved in industry. This class system is based on meritocracy, and since it's based on meritocracy, what's the key in succeeding in this class system?
Education.
Education. Talk about the significance of the middle class in this class system. So it's just really more of the same. The fact that we've developed this now truly modern society that people live in. It then goes on to talk about a society of consumers. It's just saying that basically that's what our society's become defined by, is us consuming products. Now again, we can argue whether that's good or bad, but it certainly has allowed for economic growth. Obviously now, working class and middle class together, there's only 40-hour weeks, people have more leisure time, and can enjoy, again, in all the same activities in the consumer items. What are the two most important consumer products of the 20th century? TV, cars, excellent. Automobiles and TVs, okay? Automobiles is going to really change how people what? How live. You want to know what automobiles led to in this country? Segregation is what they led to. Because automobiles are going to allow all the rich white folk in the cities to do what? Leave and set camp up in Hale Plantation, in suburbs. Okay, exactly. It was called in the 1950s, it was called white flight. And it was as a result of the automobile. And Eisenhower in the 50s, yes, built a huge, all the highways you see today, the interstate highway system, all built in the 50s. And that's going to help this white flight occur and lead to a lot of segregation in this country. And of course, television is important. It allows certain countries that are very influential, like America, even influence even more, correct? Imposing their values and culture through the expansion of television and entertainment. Talks about the welfare state. We talked about that in relation to what country, which is our best example of the modern welfare state? Britain. We mentioned the National Insurance Act and the National Health Service Act as examples. Just talking about all the different things that the welfare state creates. There's a section on gender issues in the welfare state, not too concerned about that. But then it talks about women in the post-war Western world and women in the workplace. Are women treated as equals in the workplace?
No.
No, they are not. They actually receive less money for the same exact job that what? That men do. I think it's about 80 cents on the dollar today. So they have lower wages, lower salaries. And also, look, I'm not saying that women aren't astronauts and presidents and things like that, but women are still more found in what we'll call traditional female jobs. Teaching, secretarial work, stuff like that. You know, if you took all the CEOs of the corporations in America and you said this percentage is male and this percentage is female, those percentages wouldn't even be close to what the percentages of male and female are in the country and in society. So there certainly is not equality, especially at these very upper level positions. Not equality based on numbers or based on income. As a result, what movement's going to continue to be strong in the 20th century? The
Feminism.
feminist movement. Now, we didn't talk about the beginnings of the feminist movement in the 19th century. That's when you really saw, as a result, again, all the ideas have changed in the 19th century. Nationalism, socialism, liberalism, Zionism. Yes, all these ideas have changed. Early on, though, what was the main goal of the feminist movement in the 19th century? Right to vote. Did they get that right? Yes, by World War I, most industrialized nations, and of course after World War II, we saw what country give one the right to vote? France. So now, obviously, their goals are what? They're different. What do you think are some of the goals of the feminist movement today? I've obviously just spoken about one.
Equal salary.
Equality in the workplace, of course. Equality in the workplace, access to equal jobs, and equal pay. What else? I don't know if that's as much of an issue. They have access to all that opportunities as well. Hey, women got to work, but they got to take care of who? They
Kids.
want better child care facilities offered by the state. So child care is a very important issue to the feminist movement. And of course, access to what for women? Any ideas? Birth control. All right? And now we're getting into some very volatile topics. Access to birth control and also access for women to get what?
Abortions.
Abortions. A lot of the feminist movement is about women having control over their
Bodies.
over their bodies. Now, do realize that that is something that very much divides the feminist movement as well. As again, you have many females who might believe in equality in the workplace, but that kind of heterogeneity in their goals does not exist when it comes to some of these social issues like birth control and abortion. That's something that helps keeps the feminist movement very strong. That's not that it's not strong, but it does keep it somewhat divided. This woman Beauvoir, they talk about below that, just a good example of a strong feminist in the movement in the 20th century, wrote that book called what? The Second Sex, and it really just is the idea that women are still treated as second-class citizens and have second-class status in the world and are not equal to men. What's the matter, boys? Then it talks about what's called the permissive society. This to me is a little important because basically we've been talking about the ideas of individuals and liberalism all the way from the Renaissance, yes? And to me, now that individuals are willing to do whatever they want, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever you want to call it, all right, shows me that liberalism in individuals has firmly taken root. That people are willing to express themselves as individuals. And obviously what happens as well is the rigidity of society is kind of broken down as there's been more things that were maybe passé in the past or not allowed to be done, but are more permissive today. Think about it this way. The generation of kids born after the war, too, right? They were a generation of kids that had more freedom than any generation before them, and they were more educated than any generation before them. So they're used to being free and being smart. And because they know things, they're not going to listen to who? They're not going to listen to the older generation, and they're going to do what they want. So we're seeing something interesting in the 20th century. Because we talked about divisions within religion as problems with protest, divisions within classes. Now a monstrous division of protests is between the different generations. As we're seeing a voice for the youth emerge in the post-1960 period. As a result, again, of freedom and education. And again, you see stuff that they talk about, more education of sex in schools, more talk about legalizing homosexuality, birth control pills. This is when you get the publication of Playboy in this country, which again reflects that kind of permissive society. And again, this is all post-1960s. Now, whatever you think about this or not, the fact is it is going to lead to the breakdown of what we call the traditional family. You know, we have the new show, like the new show on TV, like the new normal, correct? Two guys having children, modern family, exactly. You know, divorce rates are really high. We've seen gay marriage become a major issue, and divorce rates are really high, dude. They're like covered at 50%. But you see the breakdown of traditional family and traditional values. You know, a big part of today is premarital sex, and not only premarital sex, but extramarital sex. So we're certainly seeing a permissive society. We're seeing more of a sex culture and a drug culture emerge of individuals who just want to experience freedom. But we're really seeing an interesting thing, a protest, a questioning of authority as the younger generation protests the older. They even have a primary document in your book by Bob Dylan. And the song is called The Times They Are A-Changin', which is really all about giving a voice to the youth. All right? One-Dimensional Man is on your outline, correct? That's just a good book to associate with the youth movement of the 60s, where basically Marcuse in this book is going to more or less claim that if anybody can liberate, and basically what Marcuse is going to talk about is how the world has become so materialistic and such a consumer society, they've kind of lost themselves, and that he believes the youth are the ones that can save the world, take them out of this materialistic society. Too bad the youth have become the materialistic consumers of society. But again, Marcuse is just championing the youth and how they are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. Do you guys know what I'm saying?
Is this the lyrics?
What? It's lyrics.
It's lyrics, yeah.
Then it talks about what? It talks about art. So what we are going to now do is we are going to now go back to before or after World War I, because there are two art periods we never discussed, and I'll be honest with you. You can see there's two art periods discussed here. One is abstractionism, the other is pop art. The two art periods I'm talking about now are more important than those to you. Okay? So I don't know where you want to put these notes in, but we're going to talk about some art, but we're going back to after World War. These art periods are after World War II. All right? So just bear with me here. Well, I'll just leave it here. I don't see that yet. Okay. All right. There is no doubt that after World War I, there is a lot of despair and disillusionment in the world. All right? Again, all this kind of feeling of irrationality to many was proven by the war. All this technology and modernism that led to millions of people dying. So there are feelings of pessimism in the world and cynicism. People are very bitter. Okay? There's a lot of spiritual emptiness. A lot of people don't think there's who anymore. That there's a God. What do we call this generation after the war?
Lost
The
generation.
lost generation. And basically, obviously, culture is going to reflect this kind of hopelessness and despair and disillusionment with the future. Now, we're only going to talk about visual art today, but I wanted to start with a poem, because I believe this poem really captures this mentality better than anything else, all right? And some of you might have seen this poem before. It's very popular. It's a poem by Yeats, or Yates, however you want to say his name. You guys know that guy? Y-E-A-T-S. Not Eric. Dumbass. You guys, Yates, Y-E-A-T-S. I want you to know this poem, Chris Gainey. This poem is called The Second Coming. And let's look at it together. All right. So it says, turning and turning in the widening gyre. You guys know what a gyre is? It's like a spiral, right? Something you get stuck in, all right? Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. Is that familiar? That's a book. By who?
Ooh.
Did y'all read this just last year?
Yeah.
His name's Achebe, all right? It's a great book, and one of the reasons why I like it is that the whole idea of Achebe's book is that when he leaves his village to go away, he can never go back to the way it was. Things are changing where do you think he got the title of his book from? This poem. So basically that's what Yeats is saying. Things are falling apart. Things are changing. The center can't hold. Mere anarchy is loosened upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere, the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. Hardly are these words out when a vast image out of the spiritual world troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs. That's my favorite line. While all about it, real shadows of the I can't say that word, of the whatever desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. So he's basically saying that one era is gone and a new era has developed. And how does he characterize this new era? As a what? As a rough beast that has been sleeping for what? What has been going on for 2,000 years? Kinda. Who was around 2,000 years ago?
Jesus.
That we growing from the Christian era, and then this rough beast has been sleeping, but has now been agitated into a nightmare by our rocking world. And we are having a new ominous era that's characterized by a rough beast. All right? So the whole idea here is that we're having kind of the birth of a world that's almost inhuman. This is a man who's what? Lion body, but the head of a man, almost inhuman. So really, again, capturing this feeling after the war. A very famous poem after the war as well, that maybe you've heard of, is a poem by T.S. Eliot called The Wasteland. All right? It's about a 60-page poem. It's one of the most complex poems ever written. There are semester courses on this one poem. Because what he did is, like, every line is some kind of reference to an old poet or a myth or some kind of religious, biblical saying. And if you don't know this stuff, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Okay? But there's one line in the poem that kind of anchors the whole thing. And it basically says, what branches grow from this stony rubbish? The stony rubbish, of course, being where? The world, and really the unknown of what's going to come out of it. All right? But let's talk about some art that reflects this despair and disillusionment and how artists are going to react to it. Again, I don't know if you remember the two art periods that were in that chapter. Does anyone remember what art period starts that chapter out, the two we skipped?
Dadaism.
Well, it's called Dadaism. D-A-D-A. Dadaism. And if I had taught you Dadaism before that test, you would have found your test being D-A-D-A-D-A-D-A-D-A-D-A-D-A. But I never talked about Dadaism, so I didn't throw that in on the test this year.
What about this test?
Too late now. And boy, does that test piss people off. Why are all the answers D-A-D-A? Anyway, Dadaism is a very interesting movement. Think of it as a protest movement, all right? That is what it is. It's an anti-art protest movement. Dadaists believe that the world has become meaningless and has no purpose. And that's why their art is what? Meaningless and has no purpose. Although that's not true. Because if you are making a comment that life is meaningless by claiming your art is meaningless, guess what you're doing? You're making a point about society. But whatever. The whole idea is it's a protest art. What are they protesting?
Art.
Everything that's come before this time. Because everything has led to what's going. So all the traditional thought and all the traditional philosophies and that damn middle class and their stupid technology, and we hate war, we protest everything that's come up to this point. And that's why we call them an anti-art. Because they're not even going to use the materials that normal artists would, because they're rejecting that stuff. So a lot of Dadaists use what are called found objects, or clippings that they put to. No doubt photo collage came out of the Dada movement. Right? Taking all these images and you put them together and it just seems so absurd. It's almost like they defy analysis. So this is kind of what the opposite of what art to them is supposed to be. So you use absurd images, you enshrine that life has no meaning, and no purpose. But obviously, am I doing that? You obviously have a purpose. Okay? Interesting enough, Dadaists, as being very radical and against tradition, believed in complete equality. And that includes for women as well. And there were very, very many female Dada artists. One of the most famous is Hannah Hoch. H-O-C-H. This is in the chapter Between the Wars. Hoch. H-O-C-H. This piece is called Cut with the Kitchen Knife. I imagine many of these images were cut with a kitchen knife, which is where she got the title from. However, the full title of the the piece, where'd that go? Where did that go? I have too many papers. Where did that go? H-O-C-H, Cut with the Kitchen Knife. Oh, here it is. The real title of the painting is Cut with the Kitchen Knife, Dada through the Last Weimar Beer Belly Cultural Epoch of Germany. Okay? But basically it says in the caption very well, it says, look, what Hoch was trying to do was she combined pictures of German leaders, sports stars, and Dada artists, and basically one major theme emerged. The confrontation between the anti-Dada world and the Dada world. Okay? And look, we don't know, if we were German, we know what a lot of these images were, and then we'd see these contradictions between, again, what Dada is against and the images that reflect what Dada revolutionarily believes in. All right? So there's an interesting use of already images in society to create some kind of anti-art. Another Dada artist that's not in the book, but he's really an interesting artist, is a guy named Duchamp, D-U-C-H-A-M-P, Marcel Duchamp. He's also very famous. I thought more people might know who Marcel Duchamp is than Hannah Hoch. Marcel Duchamp was a shock artist in some respects. You know, the belief is that all that art from the past is, this art that was kind of seen as the pinnacle of Western civilization, he's going to mock. All right, to mock the past. So one of his most famous pieces is he takes the Mona Lisa, one again, the pinnacles of Western civ, and he puts a mustache on her. Okay? He's kind of vandalizing the Mona Lisa. Now, it's worse than that, by the way. I'm going to be vulgar for a minute. You're like, what's changed? The title of the piece is L-H-O-O-Q, okay? Which is an acronym for a very vulgar saying in France. And what L-H-O-O-Q loosely translated means is she is hot in the genital area, all right? He's basically calling her a what? He's calling the Mona Lisa a dirty whore, okay? These are, again, the Dada artist's feelings about Western civ and what it has led to. You okay? You look like you're about to pass out.
What?
Derek, take care of your boy.
All right. You all right?
I mean, really, are you okay?
Right.
So this, again, it's just an interesting piece of art to reflect the kind of protest that really Dada's all about. Okay? Now, the other Dada artist they talk about in your book is a man named Zara, T-Z-A-R-A. And again, Hoch and Zara, just examples of Dada artists, that's all. Now, Zara, T-Z-A-R-A, was a poet, not a visual artist, because Dada was a part of literature as well as art. He just did a lecture once on Dada, a speech about Dada, and I think it's very interesting. It's just an excerpt from it, but I wanted to read it to you. So this is from a lecture on Dada by Zara. It's from 1922. He says, I know that you've come here today to hear explanations. Well, don't expect to hear any explanations about Dada. You explain to me why you exist? You haven't the faintest idea. The acts of life have no beginning or end. Everything happens in a completely idiotic way. That is why everything is alike. Simplicity is called Dada. The beginnings of Dada was not the beginnings of an art, but the beginnings of a disgust with the magnificence of philosophers who for 3,000 years have been explaining everything to us. What for? Disgust with the pretensions of these artists who think they're God's representatives on earth. Disgust with a false form of domination and restriction of the masses. He's talking about dictatorship. Disgust with false prophets who are nothing but a front for the interests of money and pride and disease. Dada is a state of mind. Dada applies itself to everything, and yet it is nothing. It is the point where the yes and the no and all the opposites meet, not solemnly in the castles of human philosophies, but very simply at street corners like dogs and grasshoppers. Like everything in life, Dada is useless. So, just an interesting art period that reflects the mood after the war. What art period is going to evolve out of Dadaism? It's not on the outline. It's called Surrealism. Do you guys remember reading about that?
Yes.
Dadaism and then Surrealism. Now, Surrealism really continues the theme in modern art, which was rejecting reality, right? Impressionism, post-impressionism, abstract. Surrealists completely reject reality by going into where?
The surreal.
Well, thanks for defining the word with the word. They go into their fantasy world. They go into their dreams, into their subconscious. And again, you don't have control over that. Anything can happen in there. You guys dream, right? Lots of dreams have things in them that we recognize, but they don't really look, they don't really fit to, and that's a lot of surrealism. Putting objects in kind of unrecognizable relationships. All right? Because it's a fantasy world that's not really real. So that's what surrealism's all about, escaping into a fantasy world. Painting objects divorced from the normal context you would think these objects would be found in. Who is our best example of a surrealist? His name is Dali, Salvador Dali. We're lucky enough to have the Dali Museum in the state of Florida in St. Petersburg. I recommend it highly. Anyone been there? Awesome. A few paintings. Now, one thing that's interesting about Dali is that many of his paintings are really surreal, and they really don't mean anything. It's just like an exercise in creativity, okay? But the painting I'm going to show you right now is not only surreal and not real, but it really has a major symbol, okay? And that is this piece. And take a few minutes and look. Well, let me tell you what the title is. Well, this is another Dada. Somebody put a urinal in an art exhibit. That was their found object. I imagine this guy's making a big statement about, again, art is supposed to imitate life. And obviously this is what this guy's comment is about society. Go. Okay, so this painting, which is very alarming, is called Soft Construction with Boiled Beans. Soft construction with boiled, I know, right? Very surreal. Soft construction with boiled beans. Take a moment to look at this. Tell me what you think is going on in this piece. As you're, what am I seeing? Sarah?
Is this like a struggle or a fight? Like,
Oh, it's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle.
The one hand is trying to grab the other person down and the foot's trying to get away.
Yeah, it ain't another person though. This is what?
One person.
One person ripping themselves apart, right? One hand is thrusting upward, the foot is pointing downward, and you can see the anguish and pain within this person, right? Their hands, their feet, it's almost like it's falling apart as this person's ripping themselves apart. Okay? So Dali was from what country? He was Spanish, all right? What is this symbolizing?
Oh,
The Spanish Civil War. That's exactly. In fact, the title of this painting for real is Soft Construction with Boiled Beans, parentheses, premonition of a civil war. Spain was tearing itself apart. Does he think this is good for the country?
no.
No.
I don't think so.
Why is it against the blue background?
Well, again, this is kind of the surreal, the beauty of the sky contrasting with the horror of Spain. Now, why boiled beans? Why boiled beans? What?
That's so weird.
He believed that when he boiled beans, to him, it smelled like death. So the beans represent the dying of where? Of Spain, as it's being torn apart. But he does the symbolism in a very surreal, it's not very literal. It's not like the country of Spain and a big rip in it, right? That would be a pretty literal interpretation of what's happening in Spain. All right, so that's soft construction. By the way, Dali is always in his paintings, all right? He's right here. There he is. Okay, he's always there.
What?
The next one, I don't think is the best painting in the world, but it's the most famous, and it's in your book, so you should be aware of it. And that's the persistence of memory and his famous melting clocks. Again, you got melting clocks, you got ants and a timepiece. It's like none of this makes sense.
Where is he? Wait, what is this called?
persistence of memory. You tell me, where is he?
In the back part of this.
Nope.
Is he behind the tree?
Nope.
See on
Yeah.
the clock?
He's behind the tree.
What is that?
On the
Well,
clock
look.
right there?
What?
Is he
On that clock.
Nope.
What is that?
What is that then? Oh, yeah. It's,
This is Dali.
What?
It's Dali as a fetus. All right? It's before he's born. He put himself as a fetus in this painting. One more
It's like
piece
a
that I think
song.
is interesting. If you've seen this piece and you know what I'm referring to, calm down. Let's have people who don't know this painting discover it as well, okay? And that is the piece that's been right there next to the door all year. This is called the hallucinogenic torador. All right, does anyone know what's in this piece? You can just raise your hand. Okay, chill out. So, let me explain to you. Do you guys know what this image is, which is the Venus de Milo? Very famous sculptor from the Renaissance, okay? Dali decided, I want to do something with the Venus de Milo. He wasn't sure what. And then he noticed something. That when he repeated the Venus de Milo image, another image appeared, a hallucination. Now you got to look very carefully, okay? The way to look at it is you start here, because this is a collar, and that's a what? This is a tie. And if you look, and his head is bent this way. You can't look at their heads. His face is right. Here's the outline of his face. There's his mouth. Her breast is his nose. These black spots are the eye indentations. Does everyone see the face? Pretty damn cool, yeah? So it's not like you got to cross your eyes or anything. You just got to not focus on the Venus de Milos. And I think that it's very easy. Do you see it, Terrence? Okay. So the hallucinogenic torador, because this man is a what? What's a torador? A bullfighter. What's that? His red cape. This line that goes right like that. You see that line? It's the brim of his hat. Okay? This, of course, is the what? It's like the arena that the bullfighting is being fought in. All right? Here. What's this? It's a bull, right? You see the snout? And there's the eye. There's a fly. That's the eye. This is the horns. You see the horns?
Yes.
Do you guys know what these things are? These three things right there? That's what they stab the bull with in the bullfight. If you've never seen a bullfight before, it's one of the most disgusting things you'll ever see. And that's why when the bull gores the bullfighter, you cheer. Because it's disgusting what they do to these bulls, just for entertainment. This is what? These dots. That's supposed to represent the blood coming out of the bull. Okay? You have a lot of flies. He hated Spain in the summer because there were so many flies. So it's just like personal parts of his life. A tourist that he also did not like tourists in Spain. There is Dali as a little boy. Okay? Who's that? That's not Jesus. This is Gaia, who is Dali's wife. This is his muse. This is the love of his life, and she was the inspiration behind all his art. And she is in many of his pieces as well. It's Gaia or something? What? Oh. Shh. So again, just a few pieces by Dali that I think are very interesting. I got some other surrealists, but I want to finish what I want to do. What's up?
What's the name of it?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is called the hallucinogenic torador. The hallucinogenic torador. You can look at it over there, obviously, if you want. You can actually see it much clearer in that picture than on the whatever this thing is behind. All right, go back to the outline, please. And go to the art section, yes? So the two periods we just did were post-World War. These are post-World War II. There's not much to say. Abstract expressionism or abstractionism that it says there, just to continue. Look, every kind of art in the 20th century is modern art. Cubism's a modern art form. Dadaism's a modern art. Surrealism's a modern art. Abstract expressionism, it's all a modern art. And this is just, again, moving further and further away from what? Reality. Who's our example of an abstract expressionist? Then we get that. His name is Pollock. Jackson Pollock. I don't know if you guys know that guy.
Yeah.
He put the canvases on the ground. And they would take a paint can and a brush and splatter. Just splatter and drip and do things like that. Was a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. A little ash in there for good measure. To him, did you think of it?
Yes.
This is a typical Pollock piece. This is called number 8. Okay? It's a lot like Kandinsky and just using what?
Color.
Just the uses of colors, exactly. This one I love. This one I like because it's a little less, there's actually some brush strokes and some action to it, and not just drips and drips, you know? I don't remember the title of this one, but don't worry about it. The other art I wanted to mention is called what art? Pop art. Andy Warhol here. By the way, the art center of the world moves in the 20th century. From Paris to where? To New York. And that's when you get people like Pollock and then Andy Warhol, who's a man from pop art. Look, Warhol believes that pop culture and consumer goods have become such a pervasive part of our life that that's really what people value. So again, if art imitates life, I'm going to paint what I believe is the dominant values of society. So he's going to paint images of things like who?
Like famous artists.
Yeah, like Marilyn Monroe. The famous one, of course, is just painting the Campbell soup can. All right, here's one right here with athletes. You've got Pele, you've got Muhammad Ali. Again, these images, he didn't make these images. These are pictures that he's just used, put color to them, pop art. It's all about pop culture. That's what's so dominant. So that's what he's known for. Very interesting artist, actually. I used to be really fascinated by Andy Warhol when I was a kid. This is, again, one of his iconic images of Marilyn. Does anyone know who this lady is? This is Jackie Kennedy, who is JFK's wife, who was seen as the height of like pop culture. She's like, who's like a one of these elegant divas. Yeah, like Michelle Obama, but I didn't want to use a female
Audrey Hepburn.
No, I wouldn't say it. No, Sarah Palin's too much of a rural kind of a person.
Rural.
And this is the painting of the Campbell soup can. Now, what I think is even more interesting about Warhol is not only did his art comment on society, but the way he made his art was as much as a comment as well. His art studio was called The Factory, okay? Just like a factory where Campbell soup cans are made. And guess what he never did? Produced his own art. He had an assembly line of people that he hired, just like workers in a factory, that pump his art out for him. So even the way the art was made was a comment on society as much as the art itself.
So did he ever actually paint anything?
Well, again, some of the original, yes, most definitely. There are definitely paintings of his, and his style before pop art was much different than this, like a regular creative, regular art. I don't want to say creative because this is creative too. But yes, he had money, but this is what he's known for. Okay. Now look, I have, as you can see, there is something on existentialism here. Yes. There is something on Vatican II. I want to talk about those two things tomorrow. And there was one other topic I did not get to, so I'll be honest. I probably need about 10 minutes to finish things up, 5 minutes to go over the quiz, and then we'll still have enough time to do the English-Irish DBQ. Did I give you guys a handout today?
Yes.
The review?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So make sure you're on top of that stuff. You got a couple days to review. We've been going through stuff kind of well. Obviously I want you to do AP review, but we're getting ready for a test. I'm checking AP review when?
Friday.
On Friday.